Hi, my name is Doug Leasure. Thank you for joining me for another training session for Active Planner. So today we wanted to take a look at the basics of flow. That is how the data in Active Planner flows from one plan sheet to another and to another. Now within Active Planner it's always based on the plan's tree structure. Data flows from the lowest level, the child plan sheet, to its parent, from that parent plan sheet into its parent. So let's take a look at the setup and how this works in Active Planner. We're going to begin with one of our plan sheets that we created previously. And what we'll do is we'll open that up and we'll make a few small changes to it in preparation for what we're going to do today. So the first thing we want to do is to save this. Let's save this plan sheet as child. And then we'll save it again as parent. That'll help us as we're working through the process of keeping the position in mind, which is the parent and which is the child. Okay, and as I mentioned before, it's based on the tree structure. So we would want to drag our child positionally under the parent. So we begin to create a tree structure. And let's begin with modifications to the child sheet. The first thing we want to do is just change the layout here just a little bit. And let's presume that our goal here is to aggregate or to sum up the two different portions, the salary and the G&A separately. And so let's go right down here and we'll add a few rows. And this will be the total salary. And so this total would be the total G&A. Okay, and now we need to add a sum here, so we'll just do that very quickly to aggregate or sum up those cells, and then we can do a quick fill right. And in a similar way, let's fix up our G&A expense sum. Okay, so that would represent the methodology that we would want to use. And so the next part of what we need to look at is how the information on this plan sheet, this child sheet, would flow into its parent. And our goal here is that we want the total salary, the total G&A, just those two rows, those totals, to consolidate into or to flow into the parent sheet. And so the first thing I want to do is to unhide the parent row ID, and I'll help you understand how the flow works. In Active Planner, the first thing we want to consider are the column keys. So every column we've created has a unique column key. The column key is what Active Planner uses to determine which columns flow into its parent and how we line up the various columns of information. So in the parent, we need to match the exact same column key for those columns where we want the data to flow into its parent. From the row perspective, we use the parent's row ID to identify which rows will flow into the parent sheet. And so if we want the total salary row to flow into the parent, we would identify in the parent row ID column some kind of value that would identify where it's supposed to flow into the parent. And so let me go ahead and just use the verbiage that we were using for the description here, the total salary and total G&A. as the marker or as the row ID that we'll find in the parent. So it's the intersection of the column key and the parent's row ID to identify which values will flow into the parent. Now, the very nice thing about Active Planner is that it's not dependent on the position of the information between child and parent. What I mean by that is just simply, in our child sheet, row 8 and row 22 will flow into the parent. But the place it's going to flow into, the total salary and the total G&A, that could be any row in the parent. And later on, as we add rows to the parent, the row would change, but that doesn't break the flow. In a very similar way, we use the column keys to identify how the columns move up, flow into the parent. But the position in the parent could be radically different than the child. So prior year 1 is column P here. It could be column Z in the parent, and that doesn't matter. So, okay, so this is, from the child's perspective, this is the setup that we need. So let's save this, and then let's move on to the parent. Okay, and so in the parent, let's go ahead and just wipe out everything here real quickly. Find a few rows. And let's change the view option so we can see the row IDs here. Okay, and so we know that one of the items we wanted to bring up was the total G&A and total salary. So then from the perspective of the parent, the data will flow from the child into the parent based on the row ID. So we've identified here two rows where we want the data to flow. And if we look at the flow and examine the dialog box here a little bit, we see that there is a child sheet positioning under this parent, and that our row ID is total salary. Now, in Active Planner, we have two options here. One is to flow only from selected sheets. So that is, if I had 10 child sheets, I can pick and choose which ones would flow, which ones would not. Let me just say you never want to use that feature. That's just going to be very confusing and hard to manage. So what you always want to do is always use the all sheet option. Every time you set up flow, consistently use all sheets. And what that does is it says that no matter which sheets you drag into there later in life, we will attempt to consolidate values from all of those child sheets. Well, the whole point of Active Planner is to give us maximum flexibility and easily grow our plan tree from year to year. And so we always want the ability to drag additional sheets in here, to move sheets out of here without having to come back and manipulate or manage the flow. So if we use the all sheets option, that gives us the maximum flexibility that we need. And then in a very similar way, let's make sure we have the flow set up for our total G&A. And so we have the row ID is set to total G&A, but we need to assign the consolidate from to be all sheets. Okay. And again, the row IDs are, or the row numbers are very different here in the parent than they are in the child. Doesn't matter. That doesn't confuse Active Planner at all. Secondarily, let's go ahead and delete our increase column. We'll just delete that. And what that helps us to understand is that, again, the column letters are different between child and parent. The order here could be radically different than the child, and it uses the row ID and the column key, that intersection, to determine how the data flows, not positional within the sheet. So very, very powerful feature for us. Okay, now that we've set this up correctly, the last thing we want to do is to go ahead and do the consolidation process. We use the smart icon here that says Consolidate Subsheets. And when I do that, that will launch the process. And we can see that it quickly and easily consolidates the values from the child into the parent. Let's take a quick look at the report. And what we can see here is that it identifies who the parent sheet is, what sheet or sheets would be the child sheet. It tells us that it matched these row IDs, total salary and total G&A. And then from the parent's perspective, it found the total salary match on row 2. And from the child's perspective, it was row 8. So the report is very helpful. I come back here often when I needed to examine how things are flowing or if I need to debug the process. Okay, so this will help us to understand a little bit of the basics of how that works. But we need to think about one more concept, and that is that typically in Active Planner, we're not just simply flowing from one child into one parent, but that parent sheet could itself also flow into another parent. So let's go ahead and examine that very quickly here. And so, from the perspective of this sheet, this parent sheet, the anticipation is that we would have another parent above that. And so what we would want to do is to go ahead and match the same row IDs here in the parent sheet, parent's row ID, so that we can take this plan sheet and utilize it then for a parent of this sheet as well. So let me set that up. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and save this, and then we're going to save it again, and we'll call this the grandparent. Okay, and that allows us then to create a little more robust of a tree-like structure. Okay, let's cover one more small concept here, and that is the idea that we can change the order here of the rows, and that does not confuse or impact Active Planner's consolidation at all. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and take the total salary and move it down here. Now let's pause here for one brief moment. What I've done at this point, this juncture, is to create something that is actually invalid as far as the setup for Active Planner. And what I mean by that is, if I stop here, I've caused a problem in the sense that, from the perspective of our child sheet, we've said there is a row in the parent where you'll find a row ID called total salary. Take the data from this row and flow it into that row in the parent. If our parent has multiple rows that are identified with the same row ID, then there's confusion. Active Planner doesn't know which row. Should it flow to row 2 or should it flow to row 7? So this is an invalid setup within Active Planner. That is, saying it another way, our row IDs must be unique. And so if I use this kind of a setup, I would have to delete the duplicate row ID. And again, let's take a quick look at the flow and make sure we have all sheets marked here. And so if we run the consolidation here real quick, we'll see that everything works. So just highlighting the concept that the order is not critical, and even modifying the order after it's been set up does not break Active Planner's flow. And then also emphasizing the idea that the row IDs must be unique. Okay, I'm not going to save those changes. We'll leave it the way it was originally. And now let's take a look at one last concept here, and that is managing the process. So in Active Planner, we have a child sheet that has values that will flow to the parent. When I open the parent sheet, and I use the Consolidate All Subsheets, Consolidate Subsheets option, the data flows from that child, that is from one level down, all of the, whether there's one or more child sheets, the data will flow from there into this parent. Okay. So I'm not going to save the changes here, so we'll leave the parent sheet blank, and we'll go to the grandparent. From the perspective of the grandparent, when I open the sheet and use the Consolidate Subsheets, this will flow from the parent into the grandparent. It does not go all the way down to the child and pull data all the way up through. It's just doing it one level at a time. At the moment, our parent sheet is empty, and so if I consolidate, it's not finding any values. Okay, so just to emphasize, within a plan sheet, the consolidation here is one level only. Not to despair, we have a methodology then of managing the flow across the entire tree structure. And let's take a quick look at that. So in Active Planner, if I click on any one of the branches, okay, there may be where there's a tree structure beneath that, and this could be a very, very robust tree structure. I have an opportunity here to right-click and choose Plan Processing. And within Active Planner, I can choose the Processing tab. And here's where I manage the consolidation across the entire tree structure. So let me choose Consolidation and run that. Okay, and if we examine the processing report, we'll see that it retrieves the grandparent, looks below it and sees that there is a parent sheet, looks to see that there is something even lower than that, the child sheet, and so it works way all down to the child, opens that up, and then it does a consolidation from the child into the parent, displaying the information about the row IDs and where they match. Once it has updated the parent with the data from the child, it saves the parent, and then it opens the grandparent, and it flows the data then from the parent into the grandparent. So conceptually, all it's trying to do is to find its way down to the very lowest level, and to consolidate or to flow those values from the lowest level all the way through to the top node that we selected. And that's how we would manage the flow across the entire tree, not one sheet at a time. Okay, so this would cover the basics of flow or consolidation within Active Planner. And in the next session, we're going to dig deeper into some of the additional concepts about flow and how we would utilize that. So, well, thank you for joining me. I look forward to working with you in the next session.